Real pleasure to be here today. I'm all mic'd up and tanked up. Thank you, Professor Hildebrand, for that introduction. Professor Drexler for the invitation here. Professor Drexler has visited my home, actually, which I'm going to be showing you today. And he's writing about it in his forthcoming book. And, it's a great pleasure to be here and share whatever insight I can with you today about materials. Materials used in building, design, and construction and architecture, seen through the lens of sustainability and the objectives of sustainable design. I think before one can even conceive of building a high-performance piece of architecture, a sustainable piece of architecture, you have to first think about designing a culture that can support the design and construction of high-performance buildings. So for us, really, the first act of design is the cultural act of design. And it's probably the act of design that James and I spend our most time on, is the culture of our firm. Without that culture, there will be no high-performance buildings. So in our particular case, what we focus on very much is not so much the planning and doing. This is what we were taught to do in architecture school. It's what we do most of our day. Whenever I do get to spend time in the office, we're mostly planning and doing things related to buildings. And it's what we were taught to do. What we were not taught to do is the bottom half of this cycle. Monitoring what we have done and then learning from it and then applying what we've learned the next time we engage in this cycle. So this is a cycle well known, I think, today. It's a cycle of continuous improvement. In our particular case, we're an ISO-certified architectural practice. I think they're more common here in Europe. Very, very uncommon in the U.S. We're one of only a handful of practices in the U.S. that have ISO certification. But it does mean that every year, outside certifiers or auditors come into our office and look at our practices, look at what we've planned and done, and how we have monitored what we've planned and done, what we've learned from it, and how we're doing it differently the next time around. So this is a huge part of our culture, and it is the thing we value the most highly. In order to monitor and learn, however, you have to do research. You can't leave research in the university, you can't leave it in the corporation. It has to come into the practice. Without research, you don't understand what you've done, how it's actually performing, and you cannot speculate on what you can learn from what you've done and how you can do it differently and better as you go ahead in the future. So about a dozen years ago, we decided to form our practice about a research core, and we employ about 10% of the total architectural staff in our office are in this research core. A few of them are architects. One is a material scientist. One is a mechanical engineer. One is an environmental scientist. But for the most part, all they do for us is research. We have built everything in our practice to support that research kernel at the center of our practice. And that, in turn, supports us and drives everything we do. We can move that kernel and resources in that research group around our practice into the various arenas we work in. Certainly the largest of those arenas is architecture. But we do a lot of work in industrial design, urban design. We design products, building products, which I'll share with you some today. Certainly do planning work. And we have alliances with industry and institutions. So we deploy that kernel as we see fit, and we do so within a medium of communications, because without communications of research, there's no community of research. And without a community of research, there's not going to be much advancement in the practice of architecture. There are four realms we really focus in. And today I'm going to spend most of my time in the materials realm, but we also work very much in environmental systems and processes. And they really all do come together and overlap each other in many, many important ways. You cannot really think about materials without thinking about them, certainly in the context of the environment and sustainability. And I'm going to share with you a lot of that particular aspect of the topic today. However, if you want to think about topics like design for disassembly, which is part of my conversation today, you also have to do research into processes and systems. So, 4 realms, but they all come together in many important and overlapping ways. Our research group engages in many, many different research enterprises. There are 6 general categories of those enterprises: design, creation, integration, monitoring, analysis, development, listed here. By way of example, creation suggests that we do develop products. We develop building products and prototypes. In this particular instance, a focus over the last few years has been building envelopes that also generate energy. We also develop supply chains for our off-site fabrication. Since we're not primarily academics, we're primarily practicing architects. We have to figure out how to do these things as well. And when supply chains don't exist, we have to fabricate them and develop them. But these research enterprises come over and cross over in many different overlapping ways into every building that we put up in our firm. And to varying degrees, every building is an exercise in the implementation of these research agendas. One of the things we require of all our clients, they require a great deal of us, but it's fair game as an architect to require something of your client. And in our case, we require that they do at least one thing in our projects that is not business as usual, one thing that advances the state of the art of architecture. And if they don't have that spirit of adventure, they're not going to be a good match for us, nor us for them. So that's an aspect of what we require and ask of our clients. We, through our research group here, integrate many technologies, active envelope systems, off-site fabrications into our architecture, and then we monitor and test the outcomes of those performances. And so what I'm going to share with you today basically is a series of outcomes that are all based on these research agendas. This is basically an outline for my comments to you today. Again, this is the realm that we focus most of our time in here in the academy, in teaching architecture. We teach how to design and ideally how to build as well. And these are certainly considered the core disciplines of the architect. However, what we have learned in the last decade or so, or 12 years with our research group, is that there are 2 other realms that we really need to engage in that come both before we design and build something and after we design and build it. And this is in essence the total life cycle of a building. And in order to design great ethical and sustainable architecture, we have to focus hugely on what comes before we design and then what comes after we design. The total energy that a building uses, that a piece of architecture uses, is defined by 2 things: by the embodied energy that goes into the making of it, and then by the operational and management energy during its entire life. And these 2 things can become huge forces for the development of an ethical aesthetic, an aesthetic based on high-performance, sustainable architecture, provided we understand this and this. So these are the 2 realms, really, of what we focus on, not this. This is, again, the core expertise of the architect. It's what we're all taught and know, but it's not what we need to know to make the architecture of the future. This is what we need to know: body, energy, and operation and management. And they have a huge impact together on how we go about designing and building. I'm going to go about this today through 5 case studies. One of them is an existing building that we renovated. The second one is a building that also exists, a 1950s era school in Washington, D.C. that we added to and renovated. And then 3 are new, 2 houses and 1 that is in design by the U.S. Embassy in London. But I'm going to begin here first with something that already exists, with a building that already exists as a way of starting to focus on this question of embodied energy, which is going to be the principal topic of my talk today, not monitor the back end. Why is embodied energy important, first of all? Little known, and we don't have libraries of information about the energy that is embodied in our buildings today. It's a pretty startling fact, but very few buildings actually have had the energy that went into their making models. So it's unknown how much energy went into the vast majority of buildings on the Earth, including those going up today. In our own practice, our research group has begun the process of modeling our buildings for their embodied energy. And one of the things we found in the 4th building I'm going to share with you today, it's a house we put up for the Museum of Modern Art called Cellophane House, is that if you take the life cycle of a building over 40 years, that particular building, the Cellophane House, about half of the energy over a 40-year life cycle was there the day the building opened. So the operational energy of the building for 40 years equals the embodied energy that went into the making of the building. Once you know that, and you start to focus on that fact, on that simple piece of information, an awful lot changes. That's a lot of energy. And we tend to focus hugely today on operational energy, which is a very important thing. However, one thing we really have under our control is the embodied energy. What we as architects ethically choose to put into our buildings is under our direct control. And it's half of what that building is going to cost society in terms of total energy over 40 years. So that's why this is a hugely important topic. Now, the other aspect of this topic is that most of the embodied energy that architecture has in the world is already here in the buildings that exist. It's here in this building we're sitting in today, which I understand was an old horse barn years ago. The vast majority of about 98.5% to 99% is already here. In any given year in the developed world, we had about 1 to 1.5% to the building stock of where we are. So while all of the attention, it seems to me, goes to the new buildings, and I'm going to certainly share some new ones with you today, this topic of how we manage and deal with what's already here is far more important to ethical practice than the new buildings we're putting up. So the question of how to intervene in these buildings is huge for us. And about 40% of the work that our practice does to this day, 40 to 50%, is with existing buildings. So it's a huge topic for us. There are choices about the world that already exists. You can either preserve it on the one hand, or on the opposite extreme, you can eradicate it, take it away, or take it apart. And I'm going to come back to this topic of eradication a little bit later in my talk. But in between these two extremes, there's this gray zone of what we can do with the architecture that already exists. We can repurpose, renovate, recycle, reuse, renew, add to it. Those are all acts somewhere in between preservation and eradication that we can undertake related to existing buildings. A case study to share with you. It's a chapel at a women's college in Massachusetts, just outside of Boston, called Wellesley College. And it's a college that has been around for about 200 years. And it was founded as a Protestant college originally, an Anglican Protestant college. And all the students for many, many years were basically of that religious faith. And the project that we undertook for them was a very small project. It involved renovating this chapel, and we certainly chose to preserve it, but replaced a lot of materials like flooring, refinished a lot of materials, added new lighting. But the thrust of the project, in order to allow this chapel to go forward into the future, was completely different. The population of the college had changed over the years from 100% Anglican Protestant to about 20% Anglican Protestant, with virtually every other faith represented. And we were asked to design a new multi-faith center for this chapel in a crypt, a basement space beneath it, to fundamentally readapt or adjust this college and this chapel in a way that it could go forward for a completely different social structure. So you can see the magnificence of the chapel above, and in a way the sectional poverty of the space below that we began with. But we exploited that to develop a dialogue between a new social structure, a multi-faith structure, and a comparison of that new structure directly to the older structure above it, allowing both to exist at the same time. And the artistic act here of sustainability is the development of a dialogue between new and old, between an existing structure and the insertion of a new structure that allows both to coexist at the same time, representing two different social structures, allowing this to go ahead. You can see that dialogue between old and new playing out in every detail in the undercroft of this chapel. We chose to preserve every material we possibly could in the existing structure, and where we had to insert new, we developed it in a way that it didn't ever run over the top of the old, but rather was inserted within it, developing this kind of a historical dialogue between us, architects in 2010, and our predecessor, an architect around 1899, 110 years earlier, in this kind of ongoing dialogue between generations, literally. It carried through everywhere. The lower level, the multi-faith center below the chapel, which you can see on the right, was not accessible to those with disabilities. It had to be made accessible. They wanted to put the elevator in the back of the chapel. We insisted that it be placed in the narthex at the front door. At the same time, that allows those who come in and don't have the ability to actually move themselves through and down to the multi-faith center can come in the same door and move down. But it also provides an identity and a stare and a presence for the multi-faith center, again in this dialogue between new and old, between the old chapel and the new chapel. But by placing these new materials within the frame of the old materials, we allow all of the embodied energy in those old materials to go forward. I would submit to you that without the multi-faith center, this building would fall into disrepair and disuse and become materially derelict because it has to be modernized as an institution. So while we modernize the institutions, we do so in a way that doesn't mimic the old, but exists in a dialogue with it and respects it rather than cancels it or takes it out. There's also a science to this whole equation of the world that exists. It's not a world that performs very well in our present terms today. And we've undertaken a huge amount of research effort to modernize and upgrade existing structures to turn them into high-performance buildings, every bit as high-performing as new buildings. This is an early 20th century building at Yale University that is used by the School of Forestry and Environment at Yale University. And we did an experiment for them before they renovated this old building. We took two rooms. We did not modify room 3B, and we did modify room 3C to understand the performance differences. And we employed a whole whole array of sensors within the rooms, so we could monitor what was going on and how both rooms, the modified and unmodified room, were performing. There were a number of questions we were seeking answers to. One was if we insulated in the modified space and didn't insulate in the other space, where would the dew point exist within the building? Very important question in a temperate climate, because if the insulation moves the dew point within the wall, you can destroy the building. So we undertook a research agenda to understand that. And we also measured basically the reduction in heat loss in the modified construction through both these existing walls and through the windows when we modified both those pieces of construction to try and understand performance. So there's an art and a science to this type of work, where scientifically one has to upgrade the performance of the building through building systems, new building systems insertions, and artistically you have to do it in a way that establishes this sort of historical dialogue across time to allow the old to go forward within new constructs. The second case study. This is quite a bit different. Also involves a renovation, this time of a very nondescript, even extremely poor 1950s era school in Washington, D.C. It's a Quaker school called Sidwell Friends School. This is a view from the street side and a view from the back side. And this is the same view after the addition. So if you look at this, you'll see it underneath here. And if you look at this, you'll see it underneath here. Interestingly, this is it's a prep school in Washington, D.C. It happens to be the favorite school of Democratic presidents who have young children. So President Clinton's daughter went to this school, and now the Obama children are both in this school today as well. But the task here was to convert this 1950s building into what was the world's first LEED Platinum school. And we chose, despite their questioning of the strategy at the outset, we chose to keep the existing building and add to it over here and across the top, rather than remove it, largely because of the energy embodied in that building and the total energy profile that came out of that retention. The result, though, was transformative. It does have a constructed wetland for a courtyard, and all the water that comes off the building is managed down into a biology pond at the bottom here that's used for biology and water experiments by the students. So all day long, the students come and go through basically a waste processing system for the sewage of the building here, and through a system that manages water in a completely closed-loop cycle. So the whole of this project was about environmental and sustainable design education and about making that apparent to the students all day long. What I'm going to focus on, it's a very complex project, but I'm going to focus mostly on the materials side of the equation here this afternoon with you, and the cladding system for the walls of this building. We, in every instance and at every turn here, sought to use reclaimed materials. So the majority of the materials in the building were reclaimed. In this instance, all of the cladding, the Western Red Cedar cladding for the facades, which on the south-facing facade is basically a rain screen cladding system on an east facade. In addition to that, it's also a solar shading system here. But all of the wood on this building came out of recycled or reclaimed old wine barrels. And we sought to provide source knowledge for the materials in a variety of ways. Because one huge issue in sustainable design today is that we have become so removed from the natural world and from the world of fabrication as cultures that we no longer understand where things came from. So in this instance, we basically took the base off the wine barrel and made seats out of it. So these seats are curved fragments of these wine barrels as part of the source knowledge for where these materials come from. They were developed in off-site fabricated panels that were lifted onto the facade and clipped on, and we clad the whole building over a summer vacation, 6 weeks, through the off-site fabrication associated with that tactic. In addition to the source knowledge of reclaimed materials from this wine barrel, you can see the profile of the wine barrel here in the back. We also use the material almost forest-like and tree-like as another source reference, a biophilic reference to its origin, of course, as an actual tree. And this is on an east-facing facade of the building, and it's an angled solar shading system that develops a high-performance. You can see the difference between the radiation on the window here versus the unshaded window by virtue of the use of this system. So the students can read basically the difference between shading and performance, but also go back to the source knowledge of this as a tree, which made its way into this building through a wine barrel into yet a third generation of use for it that hopefully is perpetuated. We carry forward this notion of source knowledge everywhere in the building, so that students understand through embedded diagrams like this that are embedded in the walls throughout the building about where linoleum comes from, about where bamboo paneling comes from, and why it is such a great material because of the rapidity of its renewal. And where agrofiber board, which is all the casework of the building, comes from, and how you can turn sunflower seeds, for instance, into wood paneling for a building. So the source knowledge of the materials was a theme throughout this building to turn the building into a teacher. As the first LEED Platinum building in the world, it was completed about 2005. It was certainly an expensive proposition for a relatively small prep school to undertake, but the headmaster of the school justified it by saying basically that he, through the building, had permanent teachers that he didn't have to pay, so that the building became part of his faculty. So, in order to build a building like this and start to understand and have clients understand the material world of architecture, this is what you have to do for every material that goes into the building. This is a NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's a government organization in the U.S. And these are systems that they provide for rating materials. 3 different systems: overall performance, economic performance, and environmental performance. 2 different materials, cork and linoleum. And you can see some of the differences based on these different rating mechanisms. But they're ways of looking at materials in economic terms. And this is a huge, huge part of what we do as researchers today, is trying to develop information for our clients so they can make informed decisions. I think we're a huge part of the problem, frankly, the whole profession. And we're a large part of the reason why sustainable design has not moved faster into the culture. And this is part of the reason why we're part of the problem. We don't spend enough time in economic analysis and modeling of performance to help educate our clients so they can make informed decisions. We always wonder why they always choose the more expensive, or rather less expensive of the 2 items in terms of first cost. And part of the reason why is because we don't do the hard work of demonstrating other ways of thinking about cost that they might take into consideration. So, now shifting to the third topic, the third case study of lobbying us. I want to back up for just a moment before I get to the house. The city I live in, Philadelphia, is, for our part of the world, relatively ancient. William Penn founded our city in the early 17th century. So it's about a 350-year-old city now. The majority of it was built in the early 20th century, though, within the last 100 years. The vast majority of it was built. It's quite large. It stretches up along the Delaware River for about 25 miles. And most of those miles are covered with row homes like this. Hundreds of thousands of row homes, brick row homes, built from the late 19th century through about World War II. After World War II, the US population suburbanized, and a lot of these homes stopped being occupied. Perfectly good homes, built out of brick, homes that if cared for could have lasted for hundreds of years, but because of a real estate cycle that suburbanized most of the US population, tens of thousands of these homes fell into disrepair. So when I would go to work every day, I would watch these homes being taken down. Tens of thousands of them were pulverized, literally like this. And why were they pulverized? Again, this comes back to us as architects. We have learned how to build and construct, but we've not taught how to take things apart. We've not thought about it. We've not, as a profession, said we have an ethical obligation, not just for how we put the world together, but for how it comes apart. And that's why this was pulverized, because somebody didn't think about how to take it apart. That really generated, for my partner and I, and for our whole practice, a whole series of research questions. Initially, when we thought about a home like La La, and we use, by the way, we use single-family homes in our practice as holistic tests of sustainable design agendas. On our larger buildings, our clients have limited risk tolerances, and they will take risks for certain things, but not for everything. Not for the whole process, not for everything that went in it. So for our smaller projects like homes, it's particularly easy when it's your own home, which this one is in my case, and to have an unlimited tolerance for risk. So you can take on an entirely new process sometimes with these more speculative home projects that you can't do with larger institutional buildings, where you have to focus on a more limited range of topics. So here we went after everything. We basically tried to invert the ratio of on-site construction that you'd find in a typical American built home to build most of it off-site. We came up with the idea basically of several elements of architecture, integrated floor cartridges with the systems integrated within a scaffold system for the home, modular bathrooms and mechanical rooms, a modular piece of equipment that became the west facade of the building, and wall cartridges, with the idea that basically you could build this in the field with a couple of tools. The ratchet was certainly a big tool in the field to assemble the home. The other thing we had to design here was the whole supply chain. And if you have studied the automotive industry, you'll recognize this supply chain idea where there are suppliers in different tiers. And a tier 3 supplier would be a supplier of a basic material, a raw material like birch plywood. A tier 2 supplier would be somebody who aggregates multiple materials into products. And then a tier 1 supplier would be somebody who then takes those sub-assemblies and develops them into basically these individual elements, which are made up of hundreds of different parts. And then there's an assembler, someone who actually puts the building together in the field. So this is all off-site, and then on-site, there's a construction manager who handles things that are related to how the building is fastened to the ground and how utilities come into it. So we had to design a supply chain and find and convince everybody who ultimately chose to participate in it to participate. And the result is a small home. It's about 200 square meters. It's up on piles because it is on a barrier island in the Chesapeake Bay. So it sits up on piles, and it's 4 rooms, 2 bedrooms down below, a big living and dining area, and another bedroom up above, and 2 bathrooms, one here and one here. Small dwelling. The first element to go up was an aluminum scaffold system, bolted together. Cartridges that had integrated systems in them. You can see a radiant heating system being installed. in these wood cartridges here. Modular bathrooms, and there's a modular mechanical room below that were built in a factory with all the systems in it and all the fixtures and finishes completed in them going into place there. The west wall, an adjustable west wall, a passive wall that can be completely opened or completely closed. And a view from the inside out to the bay. In the bedroom, again, out onto a little porch in the bay. Now, materially speaking, this was the first project that we not only designed to enhance the productivity of how it was built, which is a huge problem worldwide in the developed world, a huge problem. We're the only industry in the United States that has had a decline in productivity since 1960. Our productivity has gone down by 20% as an industry. The productivity of the rest of our economy has gone up 220%. That's a huge swing. So part of our objective with this house was to enhance productivity, and it was put up in about 6 to 7 weeks in the field. But the other side of the equation is that if you build a house to enhance productivity, and you off-site fabricate it in chunks or elements, be they panels or modules, you can similarly disassemble the house and take it apart. Again, it comes to that ratchet wrench. So, this house was not only designed for fabrication, but also for disassembly. And it could, if it needs to, and if global warming continues the way it will need someday to be disassembled given its location. It can be taken apart and it can be moved. If it were to be moved and taken apart, we would recover over 200,000 pounds of carbon out of that building by ethically assuming the responsibility for how this house comes apart and designing it not only to be built, but to be unbuilt. So that's a lot of carbon recovery, huge amount. But the best part of this is that by designing with these principles in mind, ethical principles related to the environment, to how something comes apart, you wind up with an extraordinary aesthetic, what James and I like to refer to as an ethical aesthetic. It certainly reveals the way the house goes together, and it reveals a way that it can come apart, basically unbolting and unclipping pieces. But it yields an extraordinary architecture of desire and detail and ornamentation just by basically practicing in an ethical way. The fourth case study, a house we put up as part of an exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art in New York 2 summers ago, the Cellophane House. And we have a web book about this house now that you can purchase online if you wish, that describes the entire assembly of this house in detail. We chose in this case to use the same framing system we used in Ludlow House, but we went high, a 5-story house, almost just to prove that we could do taller buildings using these systems, but also because it just makes sense in New York City to go up rather than out. So, it's entirely about assembly, not construction. So everything that goes into construction, we basically reconceived of as an assembly rather than as a construction. And this way of thinking about the world, how it can go together faster and come apart, is completely different than construction. It yields completely different solutions. And you have to think in a totally different way as an architect. It changes everything you've ever thought of and everything you've ever known to go from a wet system to a completely dry system. So it's a mind shift that requires research and hard work and just an altogether different way of looking at the world. When I think back, actually, one of the reasons I got into architecture originally was it wasn't ephemeral. It wasn't as ephemeral as most of the world I was raised in. It lasted for a long time. This building we're in has been here a long, long time. It's seen a lot of different uses. That was an appeal to me. So this is not something we came to easily, this notion that that architecture should be more ephemeral, and we ought to be thinking about how to take it apart. It wasn't something that came by us naturally. But it does provide a huge power as a design tool and an aesthetic representative. Very complex, small house, but we used it as an experiment for how light we could make a wall that still functioned. And these walls are made out of plastic, a plastic called PET. It's the same plastic used in this bottle. That's PET. Part of what we chose to experiment with here from the material side was making the lightest house and the lightest wall we could possibly make that could still perform. So in this instance, you can kind of see sections of the wall here in the summer where in between the two layers of PET, and in addition to the PET, we have solar shading film that keeps out radiant energy but allows visible energy, daylighting, through into the interior. And it also has photovoltaics on it. But during the summer, you can see it's venting this wall out. And in the winter, you can see it's basically closing it down and trapping the heat of the sun in the wall to use it as radiant energy, as a thermal blanket for the building. But the house was basically designed to stack and to unstack, to be assembled and to disassemble. And it all had to go up in just a couple of weeks. We had 2 weeks in the field to do it, so we modularized a lot of the assembly. You can see it on an assembly line here at a building factory in Lebanon, New Jersey, Coleman Industries. It's the name of the company. You can see the frames and panels going together. And let's see if this actually works. Now,
maybe you have to put it on.
Let me try this. Let's see. Yeah, if you just click on it, it might, if you can find the quick things. Yeah, just try. Okay. Oh, it's okay. Want to try it? Okay. All right. This is a little video of the assembly of the house. There it goes. There we go. So, a small light crane was used basically. What you just saw was about a day's worth of work, so it's about a day per level. The back stack that you just saw going on is a stair. The front stack is a hollow. So there's a plastic stair. You can see them covering it up that particular night for rain. So you're up to level 3. The middle platform came with a bathroom on it. This was a modular bathroom designed by another architect, actually by Hopkins Architects in London. So they designed the bathroom for another project, and we borrowed it from them. It was used in a dormitory at Rice University. You can see here, another piece in the middle of the bathroom going right on top of the panel. We're all the way up to the 4th level here. Put the back on the front. And then basically the middle section just stands in between the back and front. And now the rooftop panels going on. Those 5 panels up the back facade near the right flag all have a plastic stair in it, which I'll show you on the inside. It's a structural plastic stair. You can see the whole roof going on with a photovoltaic array on top of it. And now we're cladding the house with the smart wrap panels on the building perimeter, which were all basically off-site fabricated in a factory in Philadelphia, and then lifted into position, all clipped, bolted into position. So the majority of what you see here occurred in the first week of construction of the house. Okay, thank you. Oops. So this is the result of that process, opening night. And you can see the interior of it. It was a modular kitchen as well, completely brought in literally as a single chunk installed in the building. The stair was a bit of a tour de force. It's a structural plastic stair that has no metal in it whatsoever. And so the treads basically are bearing on plastic. And it's got integrated LED lighting in it. Another view from the top of one of the bedrooms with the fold-away wall. The bathroom and closet is in the solid area in the back. And then a close-up view of the wall of the house. This is from looking basically from the inside of it out. You can see the photovoltaic array on it. It's a thin film photovoltaic array, and from the outside in. We monitored the performance of that array, again trying to test how a thin, very light facade made up of 2 layers of PET could actually perform. And this was our target performance level and average exterior temperatures while it was in situ. And then this is how it came apart. These are the pieces as it's disassembled. Basically, the tactic was to lift them off with a crane. We used the crane only for a day, drop them all down on the ground. You can see them being unbolted or disassembled here, taken apart on the ground into individual pieces. Every single piece has a barcode on it, so they're all recorded in terms of where they go in the building. And then they were stacked basically on 2 trucks, an open flatbed truck and a closed chamber truck, and moved to where they still reside today, a storage yard in New Jersey, awaiting the reassembly. By the way, a little bit of a story. It was sold, the whole exhibit was sold in 2008 to a developer in Moscow, and the real estate market collapsed, and he backed out of the deal. So it's still there if anybody wants it. So. But here is the total embodied energy that went into the building. And you can see through this system the percentage of recovery is almost 100%. So the idea is that nothing actually has to be reprocessed. It's all taken apart, can be moved and relocated or repurposed. And again, the result. By actually taking on these very difficult problems of sustainable design and reuse, the result is an extraordinary architecture that you couldn't dream up or make up on your own if you weren't actually trying to do something that was advancing the state of sustainable design and sustainable building. And then lastly, just to close this, a few views of a project that's in our office now. It's a competition we won to design the new United States Embassy in London. And it's in schematic design right now, and will begin construction in 2013. We had a lot of goals for this project. The biggest of these goals were that it not only be an environment for diplomacy, in which good diplomacy could occur, but that the building become a diplomat for the environment. Not something we Americans are well known for, and rather shamefully say that as a citizen. Part of the reason why we won, we think, was we stretched the requirements that the Department of State had even for itself, and are proposing to outperform all of their requirements and move ourselves into a more prideful position in terms of high technology and sustainable design. The building aims for a BREEAM outstanding status. Those of you that know that system, it's a very difficult system to get to that level. There are only a handful of buildings in the UK, and nothing of this complexity that have accomplished it yet. But what I'm going to really focus on with you today is impact reduction. And one of the things we've undertaken with this building is a complete understanding of the embodied energy of every single material in the building. The development of tools that we can use during design to keep track of and make decisions based on alternatives about materials and systems that go into the building from the perspective of embodied energy. So it's a large building, about 45,000 square meters, so it's quite large, very complex, as you can well imagine, with lots of security, blast-resistant requirements, etc. So to do this for a building of that complexity is a huge undertaking. We're developing our own software tools to manage it as we speak. It's located on the south side of the Thames. This is the Thames in between Vauxhall and Battersea, about midway. 4 major lines organizing the site: the river, 9 Elms Lane, a new greenway in this whole district, which is being redeveloped now, and then the rail line here. We have thought of the connections to the site as kind of a spiraling form that comes across the pedestrian bridge across the new greenway and spirals up and into the building with a series of aerial gardens organizing the building as it proceeds up here. The overall site basically does have a pond that is not part of the embassy grounds. Actually, this is open to the citizens of London and visitors to London, so it's a public park in front of the embassy. And this is a new greenway being put in across the back, and new development around the entire perimeter of the site. Development that we hope to provide the energy for, actually, with the renewable sources the new building generates. Some diagrams of the building as it rises up from the consular section to office areas above and below, a recreation cafeteria space in the middle of the building. We certainly, actually going into this, the fear of the City of London was that this building would be a bunker, that it would be a concrete box. And indeed, the reason why the embassy is moving out of the Grosvenor Square site is it's not defensible in today's terms. So that was the fear, and we immediately set out with images that were completely opposite the fear everyone had of this building. And this was an image that certainly became generative for us, as was this, as we went about thinking about the making of this building, to defy all expectations. We thought of it really as having a screen around the perimeter of this cubic block, and it is a cubic mass at its core, and it was a performative-based screen that did a lot of things, that basically shielded unwanted energy from the sun, reflected visible energy into the building as part of a daylight magnification scheme, and also that was sheathed with photovoltaics to develop a large part of the energy for the building. So we're right now We're about at 350,000 kilowatt hours of energy out of this, and we're working toward pushing that up to about 600,000 kilowatts of energy. And the basic objective is to move from the present realm where infrastructure exists that's outside of our architecture to power it, down to the opposite side of the equation of a generative building here, where the new building actually generates not only enough energy to operate itself and manage itself renewably, but also can sell that energy to other infrastructure. In this case, the new infrastructure and office buildings around the embassy. So the objective is carbon neutrality for this building, and to eventually go below the operational needs of the building here, providing carbon offsets to both the electrical and heating grid. We're actually able, we think, to get a lot more offset to the electrical grid now, a year later than we thought we could. But by basically going below this line, selling this energy, we ultimately have the aim of getting to the point where we pay for all the embodied energy in the building, and not only offset the operating energy, but ultimately all the embodied energy in the building, which ought to be our true measure of carbon neutrality. The word today is used basically to offset operating energy, not embodied energy. It ought to be both, in our view. That ought to be the aspiration. So just to give you some idea of what we're doing in terms of one part of the building, this is the total embodied energy projected in the building and how it's arrayed. Roughly a quarter of it is in the services, the systems of the building, the structure, gets another quarter, in the envelope another quarter. And I'm going to focus today on the simplest of the pieces, the finishes of the building. You can see the finishes make up about 13% of the embodied energy in this building. And this is one analysis of one material, basically floors, across choices. So you can see different choices of material, the total embodied energy in those choices. And you can see then the embodied carbon. So around measuring energy, we're also measuring carbon. And we're looking at the material across its life cycle. The primary production energy in it, the maintenance energy in it, and the replacement energy in it. So for example, carpet is replaced a lot, so it's got a high replacement energy factor of 9.28, whereas you can see other materials like slate or terrazzo have no replacement factor. So we're analyzing every material in the building across dimensions like this and providing the client with diagrams like this so they can understand why, well, this is the least cost approach at the start of the project and why it will be the most expensive approach across the life cycle of the project. And this is the type of information management design we need to undertake as a profession in order to allow our clients to make informed judgments. By not providing this information, we get the same old results, which is they use carbon. By providing it, you can at least have a lively debate with the client about other choices and the value of those choices. It's, again, the end result, which we expect to see 2016 with occupancy in 2017, seen from 9 Elms Lane on a rainy London day, and a view up into the consular entry with the screen system you can see here with its photovoltaic array deployed on an ETFE envelope, gathering energy from the sun. This is the south-facing facade, while also assisting in shielding energy from the building. And a look from the top of the flower market across to Battersea Station beyond. So just to circle back to where we began, this, again, is the realm that in the context of an architecture school we've historically focused on. These are the realms that we think we need to move our education toward and our practice toward and all of our investments toward. And by understanding this and this, we will design differently and build differently than we're building now. And there's huge there's huge positive energy that can come out of focusing on these seemingly dry topics that can yield an extraordinary new ethical aesthetic for the future going ahead. That's what we believe in, and that's what we try to bring to every single opportunity we have to build. So, thank you for inviting me.